All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Full Quadrant podcast. It's me, Jason, and my co-host Michael. How are you doing, Michael?
Good. How are you doing?
Hanging in there. Doing good. Weather's getting better. Ready for
Nice.
summer. So, yeah, things are good.
I think it's going to be a hot one this summer here.
I would agree. Usually we have like last year we had snow on our mountains into like June, almost end of June. The snow on our mountains is like gonna be gone probably in the next 2 weeks. So, yeah, that's kind of how I gauge what our summer's gonna look like.
Yeah. No more skiing.
Yeah.
Hiking.
Although there's been
Transition to
times in the
hiking.
past where we've been able to ski on the 4th of July and then go take a lake day and go boating in the afternoon and evening. So I don't think we'll have one of those years this year, though. Awesome. Well, hey, so second episode, since we got back from our time at Silver School in Missouri. Had some great conversations since then. It's interesting how the ones that we have where we're just talking on the phone are the ones I wish we had actually had an actual recorded call and just use those for our podcast, because those tend to be the most um, unique and substantial conversations. But we wanted to make sure to bring this some of these topics and put them out there. There's a lot to continue to talk about. It's fun that way. So, anyways, you were telling me the other day about some confusion you'd seen about different styles and approaches to the uses of pressure. And I thought that makes a lot of sense for us to talk about and clarify for people that are graduated from the school, looking to go to the school, and just looking to use better training methods with their dogs.
Yeah. So with pressure, I think the main thing, and to go to NePoPo, right? The 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 thing with NePoPo is that ideally you want to have the dog love what they're doing when you add more pressure, like to say like a level of negative reinforcement, because negative reinforcement would be something the dog wants to turn off, right? So although you can start with negative reinforcement, and if you need to do something right now, ideally you want the dog. I love doing this. I love doing this behavior, right? I love going around this cone, whatever. And when he loves doing it, then you add the pressure so that he can learn what the pressure means along with that behavior. Then when you add the pressure, now the dog, instead of being demotivated, it becomes a signal to do the behavior, and they learn that turning off that pressure is done by completing the behavior, and later that pressure becomes the correction that we use if the dog doesn't do the behavior.
All
So
right.
going
So
back to the pressure,
yeah.
the whole thing with NePoPo is the dog loving the behavior, right? And being able to use pressure and not demotivate the dog, and instead having that pressure be motivating and pushing the dog into the behavior. Okay. And then you talked about it before, the different kinds of pressure where we will start with an activating pressure. And when we talked about it, the activating pressure is not telling the dog to do anything specific. It is telling the dog just start doing something, anything. And I think you put it well, like the people that know NePoPo, it was the opposite of aversive stim, right? Whereas the aversive stim says stop this one behavior and do anything you want. And activating pressure is stop doing nothing,
Do anything but nothing.
but do something else,
Yeah,
right?
just do something.
So it's kind of like technically you could say it's like an aversive stim, but you want them to stop being passive.
They have different. I mean, it is, but it isn't, because with aversive, you're stopping behavior. Well, technically,
But
it's the
well, the
knife
key
that
with
cuts. It's
aversive,
the knife that cuts both ways, because you're telling them to
we,
stop being dormant and be active, and then
yeah,
in
except the
aversive stem, you're telling them stop doing this one thing and do anything but that one thing.
Correct. But the thing to remember with aversive stim in NePoPo is aversive means bad,
Right.
like it's something unpleasant.
It's an off-limit behavior.
Yeah, but it's the actual stim itself, the pressure is something the dog never wants to feel again, kind of thing. Whereas activating stim is not, it's just enough to get the dog moving. Like,
Correct.
hey, stop being passive, stop this one behavior of being passive,
Yeah.
do anything you want, I don't care, but
It's
just
the
be active, right?
it's the nagging mosquito in the tent that you're just buzzing around and it gets
Well,
you up and out and you start swatting around.
it's just move. And then from there, that's where we move to negative reinforcement. Now let me take a step back. So active pressure is more of, we use it when we're doing like shaping, free shaping, right? Just to push the dog, say, just, start working,
Yeah.
become active, figure something out, go figure something out, and that's where it becomes activating stim and the dog becomes active. And later you can add a cue to that, where a lot of people say, go to work, or something like that. I used to say with my one dog, are you ready to go to work? Right? Are you ready to work? And then she knew, like, I have to go do something. But it was the beginning of a free shaping session, you know. And that's where I think in our gold school too, we talked about that, where use a little pressure so the dog becomes active, but not enough where the dog thinks it has to do one specific thing. And then that's when we would move to negative reinforcement. And negative reinforcement is that nagging stim that the dog wants to turn off. But the difference with activating stim and negative reinforcement is where negative reinforcement will not stop until a behavior is completed, right? So the nagging stim continues, the nagging pressure continues until that behavior is finished in the beginning, right? And that's where I think the power of pressure comes, is that it's very clear to the dog when the pressure starts and the pressure stops. And because the tactile feeling is more important to the dog than anything,
Yeah.
you know,
It's their number one.
they,
Yeah, language.
it's, yeah. And when they react to that and they learn from that quickly, and because it's nagging, they want to turn it off and they quickly learn what turns it off. And that's where the argument for um, low level stim comes in, because the modern e-collar is so precise that you can teach complex behaviors with that pressure. And when the dog understands that turning off the pressure is the completed behavior, that's the power of low level stim, because it's a signal to tell the dog when they're correct. Where you could not do that with a higher level of stim, or with, say, prong collar or slip lead as good as you can with the e-collar, because it's so precise. And that's what I was thinking about, is that the precision of the e-collar will let you do micro adjustments. But the dog has to understand that the turning off of the pressure is, or that signal is, what is the correct thing to do,
Right.
you know.
And, you know, not to break up this conversation because we need to finish out the other uses of pressure, but for the people who've been through the school that understand the learning pyramids, it's a common misconception for people to think that there should be anything more than just a simple tap in the intermittent stage of the learning pyramids, right? Like the learning pyramids, when you're entering the use of pressure, so the NePo or the NePoPo learning pyramid, um, and in the beginning, in the learning stage, it's tap, 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 tap. Once the behavior is completed, tapping goes away, right? But as you climb that ladder and those rungs up the pyramid, the tapping becomes decreased, and eventually you're technically you should only No, you're moving into and capable to start training in intermittent style training when you are dependent only on a single tap to get the behavior to happen. If you require more than
Correct.
that, you've got a problem and you're really not in intermittent, but you might be forcing the dog into the intermittent when he's not ready for it.
Yes. And that's where the difference is. The learning stage, level one of the learning pyramid, especially the NAPO and NAPOPO, is where you're using negative reinforcement and you are transitioning to a reinforcer of the
Yes.
command.
It's the
And that
progression.
reinforcer,
Yeah, the
yeah,
progression
the
of understanding
reinforcer,
what
like you
pressure
said, is
means.
correct. So negative reinforcement is pressure in the beginning all the way until the behavior happens to teach the dog how to turn off the pressure and what turns off the pressure. And you transition to a tap with when you add the command, or actually even before you add the command, it can be a tap, right? If your context tells the dog what to do. But you're transitioning from negative reinforcement to a reinforcer of the command, and that's a tap. When you are at a tap, then that's when you start the level two of the learning pyramid, which is the intermittent stage. And in the intermittent stage, you should be at a tap, which is the reinforcer. You should not be a negative reinforcement anymore.
Right. You shouldn't
And like you
require the
said,
constant, yeah, because otherwise the dog is now dependent on it and it's not it's a dependency and not a cue or a signal.
yeah. So in the intermittent stage level two, your pressure should not be staying on until the behavior is completed. If you notice that you have to go back to that, then that's when you go back to level one. That tells
Clean
you
it
it's a
up.
diagnostic tool too. It tells you that you're not ready to go to the intermittent stage. The
100%.
dog is not ready,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that tap, the reinforcer, is also later what comes your becomes your correction, right? So the correction should be a tap if the dog is disobedient. And that's where you, again, it's diagnostic. If you tell your dog to do something and they don't do it, 1 second later you add that tap. If they don't go into the behavior that you asked for, then that tells you something. There's something missing in your training, right? Maybe you moved ahead too fast
Right.
before the dog understood that behavior completely. Or maybe there's too many competing motivators, right? Maybe your tap is too low for that environment. Whatever it is, it's diagnostic. It tells you, you know,
Right.
and that's where the transition from level one to level two, negative reinforcement to a reinforcer, which is a tap, right?
Yeah. What's and so the interesting progression of this, right? So you build with activation, just creates activity. It means do something, do anything, right? Other than nothing, right? Just be active. So in the beginning, you use activating pressure just to get the ignition and the activity level up. And then once the dog is actively moving around, basically you're just telling the dog, do anything, right? Do anything other than nothing so that you can reward the activity level. And then once you have the activity level, then you channel it and you're telling the dog to do something specific. That's the negative reinforcement aspect, right? And then once you have the negative reinforcement aspect and say do something specific, you go to reinforcing style stim or pressure to communicate to the dog to do that specific thing faster. Do it now, not in like 10 taps. Do it in one tap. And then after the reinforcer, then we move on to the understanding of like, hey, do that specific thing that I told you to do, right? Meaning like it's the correction. It's like you didn't do what I told you to do, so do what I told you to do in the first place. And then the final stage of the uses of pressure, right? Aversive pressure is do anything but this one thing. This thing is off limits. I'm drawing like lines around this specific type of behavior.
Yeah. But going back to level two, the intermittent stage, you know, that's where it's broken down. Most people should know by now that study NePoPo is that the four things that can happen. One is the cue with no
Signal
tap
nothing. No, just
and
the
no
signal.
reward, right? The other is a signal with a reward only. The third is a signal with a tap, the reinforcer, with no reward. And then the fourth is the NePoPo, which is the signal with the tap, the reinforcer, and the reward, right? So the two reinforcers, the tap and the food or whatever you want to give ball. But there also you have the possibility of a correction if the dog does not do.
Right.
And that's why, like we said, the correction should only be if the dog understands. And that's one of the mistakes that I've made in the past too, was I moved to level two of the learning pyramid before the dog understood. And you think the dog understands, you start adding corrections before the dog is ready. And that's why the correction, should not come until the dog understands.
Right.
So
Right. And once the dog does understand the correction, then you don't run into relationship issues with that dog. You don't run into rank issues where the dog might challenge you if it gets a correction that it doesn't understand. It might turn around and exhibit a consequence of punishment like aggression or redirection or even on the wrong dog, it can learn like apathy, learned helplessness. If the dog is of weaker nerve and it doesn't
yeah,
understand why it's being corrected, it can go the opposite direction and become extremely passive, submissive that way. One thing I do want to clarify now that we're talking about uh, the learning pyramids is this is a common misconception about the top of the pyramid, right? So the top of the pyramid is called stimulus control. And a lot of people think that they hear the word stimulus, and because we use the word stim for pressure or electricity, they think that you're only using E at the top of the pyramid. No, that's a misconception because stimulus actually means signal control. Like it's in turn for like a cue. So the dog is on cue, right? Again, if you look at NePoPo, behavior is on cue with heart and soul at the top of the pyramid. And so for people who've gone through the school, who've taken an online course, who see the top of the pyramid and they read stimulus control, the common misconception is, oh, this is where I'm using my e-collar all the time. No, you shouldn't
yeah,
need the tool or anything. Like it's an option up there, but it's not the requirement to be in that
yeah.
space.
But that's where the part of the it's taught, but people rarely say it, is the other part of the pyramid is that level one is always help, level two is someone help, sometimes help,
Yep.
and level three is no more help.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is level three is no more help, which means there's no tap with the command, there's no food, there's no nothing, right?
And the only way you are guaranteed to not need to help is if the dog loves the behavior, because then there's no pushing that. The dog doesn't need to get pushed to the behavior. The dog is willingly doing the behavior.
Yes. And that's where, again, it's a diagnostic tool. You will know if you get to level three, if you should be there, by you having to add the help or not,
Right.
right? There should be no help. You should say, and the dog does.
Right.
The only thing there is a correction
For not doing.
for not doing when the dog knows very well what to do.
Right.
Good. Uh, and then speaking like, I mean, getting away from the learning pyramid, the ways to add pressure, because I think I don't know if we talked about it before, but um, where you can have guiding pressure, where the dog gives into the pressure and like follows the pressure.
Yeah.
And then you can have pressure where the dog fights against it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the difference comes in learning, because for the dog to fight against pressure, the dog has to come later when the dog knows what to do. So if I tell my dog go to uh, around the cone, right? Let's say go around that cone, around that pole. If I give that command and then try to hold my dog back, say with a flat collar, uh, with a harness, if the dog understands the command, they should fight against that pressure, right? They should fight, and I should hold the pressure, and then eventually release it. But the dog should know I must do this behavior to turn off this pressure. Because if not, then the dog would give in to that pressure and stop pulling.
Right.
If you've only taught your dog give into pressure, then they should not pull you to the cone
It's
when they feel that pressure.
yeah, and it's similar to, the examples you were mentioning, and we see plenty of people enthusiastically training with dopamine boxes now, having gone through the school, which is amazing because it's a powerful tool. It's a powerful way to train and to shape the mindset of the dog, to learn how to tune out the outside distractions, how to commit to specific behaviors and to throw more commitment into a certain behavior, and how to understand, again, partly the use of pressure. But you were mentioning this earlier, and a lot of times you see the dog with his head halfway in the box, halfway out of the box. Like the ears aren't even crossing the plane of that top of the box. So it's like ears are not in, maybe the eyes can see half in and half out of the box. It's the same thing. Would you provide reinforcement to a dog if you were sending him around to go run around a cone? If the dog ran but didn't fully go around the cone and just ran short of the cone, would you still reward that? You wouldn't, because the dog is cutting corners. He didn't fully complete the behavior.
Yeah. And that's a transition. Going back to the box, the transition is that you'll see the dog do that. They will, at some point, they'll only be going halfway in the box with their head in anticipation of the click out of it. You know, and that is just the say the halfway point of the finished behavior. Because when the dog understands that the only way to get the click is when my head is all the way in the box, now they know that that's the finished behavior, and that's what they will do every single time,
And
instead of, because they all try to take shortcuts, right?
sure, but not only that, it's the qualitative aspect of how their dog, or sorry, of how the dog's head is in the box. It's not where the dog is like boom, 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 in and
It's the
out, in and out,
committed
in and out. It's
commitment.
it's a committed full in, patiently waiting, knowing that if I endure the distraction of having my head in the box, if you're doing a clatter stick outside to draw the dog out and the dog remains fully committed to keeping the head focused in the box, that's the dog showing his true intent, right? Showing he's played cards saying, I'm fully committed, I'm all in here.
Yeah, exactly. And that transitions to other behaviors, right? And you see it a lot. We talked about it before. You see it a lot with like the down, where the we have inadvertently rewarded the anticipation of the release instead of the commitment to the behavior,
Right.
right? And that just comes with, I think, slowing down and not falling into a like a pattern, and just looking at what the dog is doing and reacting to that. Going back to that active dog, reactive handling.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we should probably spend a little bit of time. I don't know if you have any examples off the top of your head, but while we're talking about the dopamine box, like I do want to make a point to say that, like, again, it's great to see all of these enthusiastic attempts and use cases, and people like using the box. But let's not forget that the box is not just a food box. It's not for the dog to be fed. It's a place for the dog to be fed if the dog has
Teaching.
earned it. And
It's for teaching too. Right.
yeah, yeah. And like, but sometimes you see people, all they do is just feed in the box. That's not the purpose of the box, right? It's not a big food bowl. It's not a big square food bowl. It's a place to refine and hone the attitude of the dog, the drive and the commitment of the dog to certain temperaments, behaviors, and things like that. Because or at the top of the pyramid, right? In box work, it should require no food to put the dog's head in the box and no food to keep it there,
Yeah.
right?
It's just like if you just like a command for sit when you're at the top of the pyramid. If you say sit, the dog should do it without food, do it without pressure. Just do it. That the For the box, the site of the box should be that cue. The side of the box should be I have to go over there and put my head in it.
It's the open door that the dog wants to walk through. It's the opportunity.
Correct. Not a command to go to the box to get your food. The the side of the box is the cue, put your head in the box.
Right. Empty box.
Correct. No requirement for pressure to go into the box, no requirement for food in the box.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is I love that I see this, but I want people to I want to make it clear, and I think it's a good place for us to make this clear that the end goal of the box is that you have an empty box, no food in it, no toys whatsoever, nothing in it, and you have a dog on leash. The dog, just by seeing the opportunity to put his head in the box, should have desire to go. The fact that you tell him to go is just a bonus, and then you allow him to go, and he goes, boom, head goes in the box. He stays there. He's committed. Whether you make it rain with reward or you let him stay there and just get satisfaction from the fact that he's doing it, that's up to you. But the requirement for food to, again, luring a dog into the box with food or using food to keep the dog's head in the box tells you you're on the pathway, but you're not at the top of the pyramid.
Correct. And I think that's where it happens a lot with not just that, but other behaviors where that we think we're finished the
Before you
behavior
really are.
and we're not, and that's where you should have your own diagnostic tools, which I mean, the learning pyramid is a perfect diagnostic tool to tell you these things.
And
Uh,
to qualify what I had just said too, is the final cherry on top, the icing on top of the cake for that behavior with the box is the dog goes on cue to the box the same way he does when he's like rip roaring to go into it because he knows there's food into it, right? There's the same quality of behavior without the requirement for that
yeah.
bait.
So that's where you would use your, uh, classical condition to to create that new cue to make the new association. The original cue should be the side of the box. The side of the box should trigger the dog. I want to get there and put my head in it. Then later you add another cue to tell the dog, okay, now go put your head in the box.
Yes.
You know, uh, and that's where then when you transition to that, now the dog will not, the side of the box will not be the cue to put your head in. It will be you telling the dog to do it.
Exactly. Because to take another example from a different discipline, it's like a dog that's been taught to bite. Obviously, he wants to bite whatever he can, but the final, the top dog training is where the dog is only allowed to do it on verbal cue, but the quality of the behavior stays the same,
Yeah. And
right?
that's the stimulus control, right? That you talked about. It's
Exactly. It's stimulus, aka read stimulus as aka signal control, right? It's something that you cue the dog to do on signal or stimulus. Stimulus is another word for cue, signal.
yeah.
Um,
And the other part, I think you mentioned it, but um, is the dog should love the behavior by that point.
Oh, well, I
right?
mean,
And that's where we talk about it's on reflex responses. Like when you say it, the dog is waiting for you to give that cue. He's like, please give that cue. Tell me to do that. Because they're not doing the behavior anymore because of pressure. They're not doing the behavior anymore because of a reward. Now they're doing it because it's a reflex and then they enjoy doing it.
right. It's interesting. I mean, because I came from this spot too. I think it's hard for people to really wrap their heads around a dog that has that much love for a behavior that isn't like truly self-rewarding, right? Like intrinsically rewarding. To like, for example, we had someone comment on a post like, can a sit really be reflexive, like truly rewarding to a dog? And like, I mean, the answer of NePoPo is absolutely it can, contingent on how it
Yeah.
was trained.
And that's where the repetitions come in. It's the way that it was trained and the repetitions. Because you cannot get to that reflex unless you put in reps,
Right.
right? You can't do 50 reps and have like a reflex response. It should be where when the dog hears that cue, it just does it and goes, I don't know why I did that, but I knew I just had to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they go, oh yeah, I love doing this thing.
Yeah. Well, and usually the response that lets you know it's on reflex response is, and that the dog has value in it, is when the dog, let's, I mean, we're going to write out this sit example, right? You tell the dog to sit, the dog sits, and then the dog's tail goes like, it's like showing it's energized, right? There's energy moving through the dog versus a dog who might sit slow and then the tail is just like, flat, the body posture, the language is not active, right? But a dog who's sitting contained but shows like that inertia, that controlled inertia, that's when you know the dog's like, oh, yeah, this is because it creates excitement.
Yes, 100%. And that's what we're going for is for the dog to be excited about doing things, and then ideally is to do it because they want to do it, not because we're asking them to. The transition to that is the key.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
That's the other thing that when we were talking about earlier that I wanted to bring up was pressure. Like when I teach the like sit down stand and using leash like a slip lead, okay, to teach sit down stand. Um, the most people they will teach a directional pressure, and that's where it said in the ways to use it's in the ways to use an e-collar where the stem becomes a command, right? But remember, stem doesn't have to be just e-collar, it's pressure. So most of the times people teach if the pressure is upward, it means sit, right? If the pressure is downward, it means down. If the pressure is like forward, it means stand, you know, and then that's an easy way to do it because you're lifting the head, you're putting the head down, you're pulling the head forward. It kind of guides the dog into those positions, right? But I a lot of times I do start with that, but I want to transition where if I pull to the side, say with a slip lead, and I say sit, the dog sits. If I again pull to the side, same way, and I say down, the dog downs. If I pull to the side the same way and I say stand, the dog stands. I want the pressure not to be a signal or a command to do a specific thing. It's do whatever I told you to do,
Right.
right? That's what the pressure should be. Not if you feel stim, recall to me, although that can be useful, you know, if you want it to be. I want the stim to be do what you heard me say. So no
So
matter what the stim is.
that's funny you bring that up because last week I uploaded an actual private coaching session between me and a client from Idaho who comes down about once a month to work with me. He's got a young German Shepherd, a black and all black German Shepherd. Super guy, super. It's a husband and wife. They've done wonderful things with this dog, but you can tell their foundation in dog training has been very, very traditional. They're using hand signals, and um, it's kind of like a hot mess right now, and we're working through it. And they're putting in the effort to clean it up. But in the video I posted, you see the guy use a hand signal to tell the dog to sit and down. And I'm like, hey, look, we're trying to get away from that because we want the dog to perform on verbal cue, because hand signals are going to be the dog's default. They're visual creatures and they don't speak our language. So they're going to default to the hand signals. And if they provide if they defer to that, your voice becomes secondary. And what happens when the dog can't see you, right? Now he can't follow your instructions. And I was explaining on that video that hand signals, in my experience, for pet owners, make a disobedient dog, because what they're trying to do is pair the hand signal with, they use hand signals and verbal cues simultaneously, but what it ends up doing is
Yes.
waters the dog's understanding about it. And then the dog only comprehends when you do both together. And most pet owners are going to either do one or sit, and then the dog's like, well, where's the other thing? Because I only do it when you do sit or down or wait or stay. And I told him, I'm like, hey, look, I'll a lot of pet trainers would come at me for this, but I'll fight each and every one of them, because hand signals in the context of a pet household make a disobedient dog. Now, I will say, caveat before I wrap this up here, there are places where hand signals are very appropriate and very needed, like hunting dogs, police canines, things like that. There are a lot of, and even service dogs might benefit from, and deaf dogs that can't hear you but must rely on you visually or tactilely. There are a lot of caveats for when hand signals are appropriate and quite needed. But in pet households where the dog is healthy and the owner is capable, hand signals are garbage. They get in the way and they make a disobedient dog. I'll
It's
go out there and say that. That's a hill I'll die on.
yeah. So I would say they're garbage only because, like you said, they put them together, the verbal and the hand signal, and they're not consistent. Because that I run into that all the time. Every single pet person, hand signal and verbal at the same time. The problem is some people teach that,
Right.
which means they don't understand classical conditioning. The people teaching that don't understand it. And I have to keep telling, the pet parents or whatever you want to call them, right? I have to keep telling them, don't put the signals together. Just for what you said, you're muddying it up. You're making a disobedient dog, especially to the verbal. And a lot of times, that's why the dog, when it's not facing you and you give it a command, it doesn't listen,
Yep.
because it's not a complete signal, because the hand motion's not there, the hand signal's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep telling you, that's hard for people to do. And it comes to when somebody is holding the leash too. And what people do, and I think it's 99.9999999% of people, we react physically before we react verbally. Because what you'll see is the dog, and the learning does not happen. The dog is going to pick something up that it's not supposed to, and you're holding the leash, or the person's holding the leash. What do? They jerk the leash, and then they say no.
Do you know why?
And it
Do
was
you know why people react physically before they react verbally?
the scientific reason, you mean?
Yeah, I mean it's scientific, but like it's physiological, but like it's a
Yeah,
reflex response. Like we process
correct.
emotion, and it's faster for us to move a muscle than it is to calculate and compute
Yep.
a verbal statement, right? And so
Yeah.
that's why we do it, because our bodies are wired neurologically to respond with movement when we feel an emotion, whether that's a fight or flight emotion, a parasympathetic or a sympathetic emotion. We respond with muscle movement before our brain is capable of processing the sound and translating that into the
Yeah.
Right. The
And
statement.
that's where I tell people you have to discipline yourself to speak first and then react if you have to. But it was a perfect example. That's where the confusion comes in for the dog, right? Say they understand the word no, means don't do that. Okay. And it was perfect. The dog was going to grab something, right? He pulled it away because he reacted physically. The dog stopped trying to get it, and then he said no. And then I told the guy, you just told the dog not to, you told no when he wasn't doing anything, when he was being good. I said, you cannot pull him away from what he was doing and then say no, because now there's confusion. And now the dog is going to stop listening because he doesn't understand what you're saying. If you're
Right.
going to say the no for that, you have to say it while he's doing it and then use the leash
Yeah.
to stop the behavior,
Yeah.
you know? And you see it so much. I mean, I have to, be disciplined myself because, like you said, it's physiological. Like you can't, it just happens. And that's where you slow down your training so that you don't react physically and that you're communicating the best way to the dog so that he can understand, what he's supposed to be doing or what he's not supposed to be doing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, we have these tendencies that cause us to do things that we don't even know we're not even consciously aware of. We're just unknowingly, which is the benefit of having a spotter who can see if what you think you're doing is actually what is happening. And that's why dog sport is such a good school for becoming a better dog trainer, because it requires you to rely on other people to actually adjudicate your performance and your training.
But a good club, not just any club,
They
right?
have to have
For
the
dog
eyes to
sport.
see what you're needing to see.
And because when I first started in IGP, the the club members would bring all their chairs out and they'd line them up on the side of the field, and then the training director would take one person out to the middle of the field, and everybody else would sit on the side and talk to each other. And when I first started going, I was like, I can't hear what's going on. I'm not learning anything,
Yeah.
right? So eventually, after a couple times, I would just start going out there with the person that was working and the guy teaching,
I love that you're
right? Because
saying
I was like,
this.
I need to learn because I can learn from whatever they're doing too.
Absolutely. Like click, 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 click. Like, like to what you just said. I mean, I like ask anyone in my club, Matrix Dog Sport. Like they should not be talking on the sidelines, and I there should be a crowd of people out there either spotting or just observing close enough within earshot to hear what is the dialogue being given back and forth between handler and the person doing the coaching. Because there's so much to learn. Like if you're smart, you'll learn from other people and you'll be a better, faster, you'll be a better trainer in less time and you'll arrive at results quicker
Yeah,
because of it.
because they they may be ahead of you, so you will eventually be there. So it's good to know like the things that are happening ahead of where you're at. But also, if they're not ahead of you, now it might be something you didn't think of, right? Or it might be something you see where you can tell the next person, like, that you're teaching or helping in the club.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it was funny, man. Everybody would sit on the sidelines.
So that kind of brings me to another conversation we never fully finished, but I want to talk about because it's kind of taking us there right now. So in like sports and even the industry as in general, right? There's this gatekeeper mentality to dog training, saying that um if you haven't, like, let's take sport because sport's a pretty easy example because it's pretty rampant there. Um, if you haven't gone to the world championships, you have no business teaching someone else how to do something, right?
That's what
And
they say.
that's what they say. Yeah, it's what they say. And a lot of people are out there like really like really cutting people out under their cutting their legs out from under them, like people who are really talented and saying that they shouldn't be training. Like I know several people, even like whether they're in police work, like there are some old folks, like some people who've done some pretty impressive things and they've written books and translated books even from like European languages and they're calling out some people who are really young, younger than me, who are doing amazing things. They're running police departments, they're running canine units, and they're strictly civilians. And some of the best dog trainers I know are civilian dog trainers, and they run police units. They provide the best training. And some, like, seriously, some of the I have three people that I'm thinking of right now on the off the top of my head that are civilian dog trainers that are like masters of their craft, and they do amazing work for police departments. They've, you know, um, some have gone to high levels in sport, some haven't, but I don't think that that's necessarily a requirement before you can be in a position to teach others. Because, like, for example, I grew up playing tennis competitively, and in the 90s, Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi were the top American tennis players, and they were the top tennis players in the world. And you look at them, and Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi, they had coaches who did not accomplish half of what they had accomplished, but they had an eye to see, like you said, the club. It was the spotter. They had the eye to see what they needed to do to improve, and they were able to do that. And I think in some cases you can arrive at a very skilled level where you may not ever accomplish some things that other people have, but doesn't just because you haven't doesn't mean that you can't provide very valuable coaching to people, right?
Yes, and that's the problem. The problem is where the it's not that um it's not that they don't know or know how to teach or don't know how to teach. It's that the other people dismiss them without knowing what they know or how they teach, right?
Right.
That's the point.
Yeah.
If you listen to them and watch them and you go, okay, I now you make your decision after you learn what they have to say, that's okay. But if you dismiss them right off the bat just because of something, and that happens with police, I mean, a lot, right? Uh, but I would argue that you said some civilian trainers. I would argue that most civilian trainers are better than any police trainers, like
I mean,
especially handlers.
I want to keep myself in check and make sure I'm not like throwing blanket statements and generalizations out there, because there are some people that are civilian that are really horrible too, and
Yeah.
fully admitting that. Um, but it's this gatekeeper mentality. Like, this is not a complete science, which is why there's no college degree for like 4-year university degree that gives you a degree as a professional dog trainer. There are trade schools that do that, but because it's an art, it's a trade, it's a craft, but there's equal parts science included in that. Um, and because of that, I think there's a lot of pride that people have, because it takes a lot of time to earn your stripes in this industry, right? You have to have a lot of trial and error. And in order to be really good, most people that have accomplished and become very good had good mentors, had good influences, people that they learned from and stood on their shoulders. Um, and at the end of the day, dog training it's not a race, because there's no destination. There's no there's no 100% knowledge of dogs that we will ever arrive at. We'll always continue adding to what we know now, and that continues to evolve, and methods will change and get better, and we'll identify things that work differently. And even the breeds, as the breeds evolve, right? Training is going to change as well.
Thing you every different dog that you touch, you learn something new, or you learn a different way to apply what you already know, right? There's little nuances that are different from this dog to the next. And also, like you talk about mentors or whatever, and that's the thing. Some people are just talented. They don't need to have 20 years of experience to be at the same level as that person. They could have 5 years, but be at the same level as that person with 20 years because they are talented,
And
right? It's
honestly,
just like
that's
you see the 5-year-old kids playing piano. Now, are you going to say they're not as good as the person playing for 30 years when they're a
yeah,
virtuoso, right?
it's clearly
They're
better.
better than the person playing for 30 years.
Yeah, and that's the challenge here is that like people are so threatened by outside talent or up and coming people. Now there is something to be said of like a little bit of like stolen valor or stolen credibility. Like you can't write off of someone else's coattails and accomplishments if you yourself have not been cannot put that out there, right? And I think that's where some of the criticism claims come from, where like, oh, if you can't take a dog to the world championships, you shouldn't be in a position where you're teaching this stuff, right? I disagree with that. And then there are some other people who say it from a perspective where they don't want people to get injured because this can be a risky sport. Dogs bite, cats scratch, horses kick, right? And so they don't want innocent people like blindly trusting someone because they say they can do it and where they really can't and causing injury to a dog or to a person. That's something else to consider and being, looking at all sides of the issue here. I think that does have some play, but I think there's a lot of people that need to, like you said, they need to be able to take a look and say, hey, okay, you're doing this. I'm curious to see why you think you're good enough to do this. And then if they do happen to be good enough and they've only been in this for, like 5, 10 years, like, man, good on them. And that's great. Like, teach me how you got there faster than I got there in my lifetime so I can continue adding to my repertoire.
Yep, exactly. It's just don't dismiss people because of what you think they know or may not know, or what you think is the definition of a good trainer,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
So I think it requires integrity on everyone's part, don't steal credibility for things that you're not capable of doing. And like the biggest thing is, when I walked away from um my first time in the school, like the the encouragement was to everybody in that class was, now you've gone through the school, go show your dog or show that the dogs that you train, right? And I mean, I love being able to promote. I've got a lot of people that I work with, a lot of dogs I've trained, a lot of my personal dogs. I love to, like go out there and show your dog because that is your resume, right? Show your dog.
Yeah. The other thing with the school was that also, which really is important. And it was that I remember like Bart and Michael who said, you can go learn from anybody. You can learn from anybody, right? Don't limit to just say this is it and this is the right way. You have to go learn. Go see what other people are doing and see if it fits into what you're doing or if you want to, use it. Maybe it's better. Innovation just doesn't come always from the same people.
Right.
It comes from different places. So and that's what I always love about that. There's no saying anybody's doing something wrong, and that the definition of that is your heart performing on cue with heart and soul.
Yeah.
If you are, then you're doing something right. Right. And
Yep.
that's the key to look at everything.
Right. Yeah, it's good. It's so anything
Did
else
we
to wrap up this conversation about, we started on, the uses of pressure. We talked about, to recap, we talked about activation stem, negative reinforcement stem, reinforcing stem, corrective stem, aversive stem. Anything else you want to add to that, or I guess really any of the topics that we've covered?
No, I mean we could dive into each one,
Should we, real quick?
deeper. But then we'd be here for like 5 hours.
Yeah. We could maybe we do that. Maybe we try to fit that in on another one.
Oh, the only thing would be that, like, we're talking about pressure. Pressure is not necessarily about the level of pressure. It's about the understanding of, in this case, the dog,
Hmm.
where the pressure is being
How
applied.
it perceives.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's
Mhm.
about understanding, you know. Um, and the the other thing with pressure is that why we do NePoPo and not Popo Ne is just because of that, is because of the understanding. We want the understanding to be there for the dog before we start using pressure to change things or fix things, right?
I've heard a few really good phrases. Is that, pressure is used to pressure predicts the outcome or the reward. And then also in NePoPo, it's preparing the dog to understand the eventual correction it will receive in its life.
Yeah. Again, it has to be understanding,
Right.
right? And that's the purpose. The dog understands what a correction is before you use it as a correction.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep. That's really
perfect.
good. So what's up in the world of level 3 canine? What do you have going on?
Um, just getting ready to deal with the heat in Vegas. I'm actually I'm putting a mini split system into my garage
Oh, nice.
to make it like so I can, when it's 115 outside, I can comfortably train in a space.
Yeah.
Because here, when it gets hot, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, it's 95 degrees.
Dude.
Which is something like I never understood other people. Like I'd go places and it would be like 82 degrees, and he'd be like, "Oh, I have to cool my dog down." Right? I was like, "Oh, yeah, we train when it's 95. I don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
But I guess it's acclimation to the heat.
Right.
Because yeah, we used to do that all. I mean, it'd be nighttime, 95 degrees, 100 degrees. Of course, we don't train for, an hour, but you do short training and then let your dog rest. The next person would come out and train, but we'd still train when it's 95 or whatever. Not in the sun, of course, when the sun goes down. But
Sure. Yeah, you're the typical dog that when he starts to feel pressure, he tries to find a way to deal with it, maybe like moving his kinking his neck to the side to get away from pressure. You're trying to have your cake and eat it too down there.
oh, that's another thing I'm putting. I'm putting in a thermostat in my van.
Uh-huh.
So because right now the air I have for the dogs, it just runs constantly.
Oh.
It doesn't matter. It
Oh,
could go
so
down to
so
65
you want it to
degrees.
only run at a certain threshold.
Yeah, because that'll let the batteries last longer too,
Yeah. Yeah.
if it's not running constantly.
Right.
So,
Well,
which I need.
one other response to pressure is to, you can just get away from it altogether and come up north about 5 hours, and it's probably 20 degrees cooler up here. It's that you can find that 85-degree weather, 95-degree weather that you'd want to train in up here.
That would solve um, a lot of my problems. Well, not problems, but a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with my sport and having time to train for sport.
Yeah.
Or not having time, but having the right people, to train with, I should say.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks guys for listening. We appreciate everyone who's followed. We've been putting out some shorts. Hopefully you guys see those.
Yeah.
And I want
And
to myself, I want to be better about putting some actual clips that demonstrate some of the concepts that we're talking about. So I'm going to encourage Michael and myself to like start posting some more like actual training clips of some of these concepts, like maybe dopamine box or active dog stuff. So hopefully that's something you guys will find value in and benefit from. But stay tuned to our channel. Every update that comes out, take a look at it. Give us some feedback on the videos. Let us know what stands out, what's interesting, or what you'd like to see, and
yeah.
we'd love to hear it.
And oh, yeah, also like the episodes we've had, even though they have a title, right? A lot of times there's more
It's hard to
um,
encapsulate the entire
content.
episode.
Yeah, it's not always just what the title says. There's interspersed in there, there's other stuff, right? So if you listen, if you only pick one episode just because of the title, I would encourage you guys to listen to the other ones too, because they'll overlap, right? Because we're talking about NePoPo and different aspects of it. So
Right. And who knew that opposition reflex could have so much to do with uh helper work or decoy work, right?
yep, cool.
So anyways, all right, man.
All right, man.
Hey, good conversation. Always great chatting with you, Mike. And yeah, appreciate our viewers and appreciate anyone who likes, shares, and follows and passes this along to other people. So
Yep. Thanks for watching.
all right. Hey, we'll talk to you later, Mike.
Peace. Bye.